Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, the floods are just not stopping. I don't know how long you've been watching my channel. Put it in the comments below. I'd be interested to get an idea how long everybody's been watching the channel. I'm always getting new people, amazingly. I don't know at what point the growth is going to stop, but it just keeps going, which is good. But I've been keeping track of these natural disasters as far as like putting them on a spreadsheet like this. Basically only, I think I started, man, I can't remember. It may have been late June or July, early August, around that time. What made me want to do it was primarily all this Canadian wildfire smoke that was going on. And I wanted to see just how massive this event was, because I noticed just city after city after city, state after state after state, country after country was being covered by this Canadian wildfire smoke. And so I put together a tracker, and just through the process of time, I ended up wanting to do keep track of capital cities first, but then I realized that there's just so much more going on in the world. And so I started tracking anything that I felt is kind of like a major disaster. Not so much earthquakes or not earthquakes, because I have another spreadsheet for that, and wildfires, I have another spreadsheet for that. Those are, categories of their own. But these like hurricanes, flooding, wildfire smoke, and on and on and on. And so I wish I had more data that went back further. But I feel pretty confident in saying that what we've seen in September is not normal. Like I've said before, I've always been kind of a news junkie. Maybe some of you are too. I don't remember so much flash flooding taking place in such a small window of time. Flash flooding has occurred throughout the history of the world, but it is just like off the hook right now, especially September. In fact, why don't we count it up really quick? So starting on the 3rd of September, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. I have 26 separate events so far. And again, we're not even done with September yet. Today is September 23rd. And I have 2 new events that have happened over the last 24 hours. We have, I'm gonna be careful how I pronounce this. Okay, it's a different language. Phuket, Thailand, and Nagpur, India. These are the 2 most recent. And let me just show you some of the videos. Well, actually, before I do that, as you know, I always verify first before I share videos. I don't want to share something that was from a long time ago or from a completely different location, because sometimes people just post things and just take things for face value when it's wrong. But no, this did happen. Nagpur, India. Okay, we got Times of India and weather.com that have confirmed it. And then there's actually a bunch of different articles talking about it. It seems like this is kind of a bigger event than some of the other ones. And then we have Thailand. And I've been able to verify it with the Phuket News. They have a couple articles about it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the videos. Nagpur. Right now, what I have selected on my Google Earth is everything that's happened in September. Okay, all these blue place marks that look like this, that look like an upside down raindrop. These are all places that have experienced flash flooding like really intense flash flooding. There's already been some in India. We have this set right here, and then we had another city, Baruch, and now we have, oops, let me rename that, missing the R, Nagpur. So this is the area that we're talking about today, Nagpur, India. Okay, so disaster news: massive flooding at street due to heavy rains in the Nagpur city of Maharashtra, India. And this one is a raging river. This is, yeah, it's a pretty strong current, and it looks like the raft is having a little bit of difficulty or experiencing some resistance as it's trying to go against the current, especially like right here. So there's that. Disaster news: massive floods due to extreme rainfall in Nagpur. You have a submerged vehicle or two, vehicles that are being swept away, and a raging current going down what is normally a city street. Let's go here. We've got like a bus station. Buses half submerged. Hopefully you saw that there were some people on top of these buses. That's a common scene that we've been seeing a lot this month. People stranded on top of vehicles. Let's go here. I don't know if this is the same raft, but a different person videoing it. But you can see the water's pretty deep. It's probably up to maybe up to your thighs, your waist, something like that. This is the Nagpur railway station. A lot of times we'll see like subway stations because since they're underground, the water just naturally goes the path of the least resistance and goes downhill. But here's a railway station that's being flooded. That's lovely. Looks like that water goes up to maybe your ankles. Oh, oops. Is this the same one? Yeah, sorry, this is the same one. Already kind of saw that. There's a couple other videos there. Let's see. Nagpur 360. Such is the price Nagpur, in fact, all Indian cities, is paying for mindless development to cater to the cancerous growth population. They're saying that it's because of development. I don't know. To me, based on what I'm seeing, I don't think it's because of development. I don't know what this person is saying, but it doesn't seem to be an India problem because it's also happening. Well, China's probably not the best example, but it's happening in China, Thailand, Indonesia. It's happening in the United States. Right? Massachusetts, Atlanta, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina. We got Rio, the state of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil. We have Nigeria and Ghana. We also have Libya, Tunisia, Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, Spain, France, the United Kingdom. Oh, and then also, not to mention the Gaza Strip in Israel and Iran, all this month. So I think the problem is a little bit bigger than a cancerous growth population, which of course is probably one of those anti-human people that basically wants to see the humanity wither away and die. Nitin Cobrigade, that's the username, says hashtag Nagpur Ambazari lake flow. So just more rapids, I guess you could say, raging rapids. Volcaholic, this just breaks my heart. And here you can see, I guess what would have been a watermelon stand with watermelons floating in the flood water. Here's a picture. This is another thing that we typically see, when the soil gets saturated, then it gives way, especially when there's weight on top of it, like roads and stuff like that. So here you have what looks like a bridge that's partially collapsed. Nitin Kobag, the same person, Nagpur flooding due to heavy rainfall, dated the 22nd night. That's how she worded it. And there's that same statue. This is like a different location, but in that same area. And it's really powerful. You see, well, I'm guessing that this is like a drain, or like where water is supposed to be, because there's like a bridge right there. But then you can see where water is not supposed to be, to the side. Okay, and then that brings us to Thailand. So just over here, this is where this is taking place. Let me zoom out. Here you have China up here that's already seen a lot of flash flooding. India over here where we just were. Indonesia, earlier this month in Jakarta, the capital city, there was flash flooding of this sort. And now we're in Thailand. So you can see some kind of like shopping district or something like that, with people being pulled in a boat being pulled by somebody that's not in the boat. I don't know if they're being rescued. These two people look like they're in uniforms, so maybe they're being rescued. I don't know what's happening there. Some submerged vehicles. A roundabout with a pretty cool decoration in the middle. And then you just see all the flooding around there. Oh yeah, look, here's a picture of that guy. Yeah, he's an emergency worker. So he's saving those people in these in these emergency boats to save people. I'm pretty sure if he can make it, if I don't know, he is an emergency worker, so he's a trained professional. But putting that aside, I think if he's okay enough to stand and pull these people in this little boat, maybe they can. I don't know. Whatever. He's a public servant, and he is providing a service. Okay. Another vehicle submerged. And then that brings us to the end of what I have. So, I don't know. I'm astonished. I'm amazed. Of course, you can look at this kind of symbolically. We have all this flooding, not just flooding, but flash flooding. There's only a couple of these where it's like just kind of like regular flooding, like rivers or lakes kind of overflowing, like that kind of flooding. But the vast majority of these are flash flooding, just like really fast accumulations of water going in places that it doesn't typically go. Like you've seen down city streets, for example. And so you could look at this like, the world is basically being flash flooded. And that could be a foreshadowing of the coming second coming, because we know that when the earth is burned, that corresponds, and it's parallel to the flooding at the time of Noah. The flooding at the time of Noah was the baptism of the earth, where it was literally baptized with water. And then when Christ comes, there's going to be the baptism of fire. We've looked into that, and based on what we studied from all the different quotes and scriptures, it seems that the fire is actually going to be just simply the glory of Christ coming to the world. I'm not going to go over that right now, but it makes sense, because when you were baptized, you were literally baptized in water. But at least for my baptism, I don't remember there being like a fire pit that I was put into to get baptized by fire, but rather, you sat down in a chair and received the gift of the Holy Ghost. And so it would make sense that it would be more along those lines, although the wicked will, quote unquote, burn or perish because of that glory that comes upon the earth. But whatever the case, There's flooding. The world is flooding. Very similar. Well, no, not very similar, but it kind of makes you think back to the time of Noah and how the earth is going to receive its baptism of fire. It's not going to be flooded again. Like the whole world's not going to be flooded again, but you get what I'm saying. All right. So that's all that I have for you. Let me select the whole year so you can see what 2023 has looked like so far. There's been a lot more. Here's the Canadian wildfire smoke area that I've been able to track. All these gray orbs are cities, specifically capital cities that saw the Canadian wildfire smoke. It went all the way across the Atlantic to Portugal and Spain. Spain has really seen a lot of things this year in particular. But anyway, and then we have just wildfires all over the place, especially in Greece and then in Canada. And then, of course, we had Lahaina that was destroyed by fire. I completely expect that this will be brought up in this upcoming general conference. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the earthquake in Morocco and the flooding in Libya are brought up too. We'll have to keep an eye out for that. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's move on. I wanted to go over some more common misconceptions. And these ones, okay, so I have two. I think I'm going to be able to get to these two. The first one is the misconception that prophets from the past taught the more pure doctrine. Prophets today are removed from original teachings of the church. That is an idea that's usually pushed by, of course, these apostate groups like the polygamists, the different polygamist groups, but it can also happen within our own church, people that haven't yet broken off and created their own splinter group. But there's a lot of people that kind of flirt with this idea. They'll continually go back to, like, for example, the Journal of Discourses or their own private interpretation of Doctrine and Covenants, and they'll be like, well, this isn't what I read in Doctrine and Covenants. It's usually the crowd that really romanticizes the early leaders of the church, and it's like they don't want to listen to what's happened since that time. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because the way that they look at those early leaders, everything just seemed like really exciting, very alive, like things were happening. I don't know what it is, and frankly, I've seen a lot of people that really get into the whole, like, the 10 lost tribes being a main group hidden somewhere. And just like that kind of crowd, like the 144,000, we still haven't seen them yet. And the 10 lost tribes have to come from whatever, Hollow Earth or whatever like that. They seem to, from what I've seen, I'm not saying that if you believe those things that you're apostate or anything like that, but I have seen some of that crowd that seem to have this idea that, well, we've kind of gone astray. The church is going the way of the world. President Nelson, I don't like, I assume his politics because some things that he's doing with the church, and, we're getting away from the original teachings. And that is not true. And that's a very, very dangerous path to take. So let's just go ahead and start reading. I only have a couple so far, just a couple quotes that have to do with this whole idea. So the first one is from Bruce R. McConkie. This was in a 1982 devotional at the University of Utah. He says, "We're going to be judged in the intellectual field, and certainly that's going to involve the seeking of truth and study. It's going to involve false doctrine. I think that a good deal of false doctrine that goes around is purely an intellectual enterprise." Okay, pause. I would probably say and add to that I think this goes along with the idea of leaning to your own understanding, right? Thinking that you're just able to, interpret scripture, determine doctrine, map out the future, come up with these like timelines and stuff like that. Okay, an intellectual enterprise, leaning to your own strength, to your own wisdom. All right, continuing, he says, in the hands of those who believe it. They rationalize this or that to make the conduct that they have harmonious. I can't think of a better illustration of that than this Adam God philosophy that goes around. Pause. I don't know. Why am I saying pause? So this is one of those things, you guys, that the polygamist sects or the polygamist breakoffs have held on to. The misunderstanding and the false doctrine that Adam is God the Father. It's a very bizarre, very strange thing. But I think that this has pretty well been stamped out of the membership of the church. But I think that this probably was a problem for a little while. But anyway, he says, I can't think of a better illustration of that than this Adam God philosophy that goes around. People say they believe that Adam is God, that we worship him, and that he is the father of our spirits as well as the father of our bodies. They want to believe that, and the reason is that they can quote somebody of the past who seems to have said it, and somebody of the present who denies it's true. So it's this whole thing of like, again, going with obscure quotes, you know. And yes, I myself, I collect quotes. I collect quotes. But I put so much more emphasis on the ones that are repeated over and over and over again, right? And especially if in the future there's a future quote or a bunch of quotes that contradict a previous quote, I go with the ones that are more recent because I understand, and hopefully you understand, that God reveals things line upon line, precept upon precept. As we go forward in time, things become clearer and clearer, and doctrines become better understood. It's not by going backwards. That's the exact opposite way. The past will kind of like establish foundations, but then there's more and more that we learned as time goes on, and as more and more is revealed to the prophets and apostles. So anyway, let me read that again. They want to believe that, and the reason is that they can quote somebody of the past who seems to have said it, and somebody of the present who denies it's true. Then they can say, well, Spencer Kimball says this, and somebody of the past said something else, and I'll choose to believe what somebody in the past said. And that enables them then to say that somebody of the past believed in plural marriage, and Spencer Kimball doesn't. And because the past prophets are true and the living prophets aren't, I think I'll enter plural marriage. And of course, they lose their souls. Now, that's just a perfect intellectual enterprise on their part to justify the lusts and appetites of the flesh. And I would add to that, not just lusts and appetites, because that could be the case if you're wanting to get into plural marriage right now when it's not authorized. But again, you have people that they develop a following, you know, they sell books or whatever the case may be. And so there may be monetary value in doing it, or it may just be getting attention. You know, you have your own take on things. And so you develop this kind of like this brand, and people look to you. So there's like any number of motivations, but it is never right that, you know, there's like disharmony within the church between the past and the present. It's just that things become clearer over time. All right. And then the next one, this is from the most recent General Conference, April 2023 General Conference, Elder Alan D. Haney of the 70. He says, brothers and sisters, unlike vintage comic books and classic cars, prophetic teachings do not become more valuable with age. That is why we should not seek to use the words of past prophets to dismiss the teachings of living prophets. And that's exactly what you will find here on YouTube. There's any number of LDS channels that do this. This is twisted, bizarre, backwards way of thinking that, well, back then things were more pure and things have become like diluted over time. And that's not the case at all. That's not the case at all. Furthermore, let me just bring up one more thing. Oh man, am I going to be able to find it? Okay, I was able to find it. It was by Elder Neil L. Andersen, Trial of Your Faith, from the October 2012 General Conference. All right, so listen to this. A few question their faith when they find a statement made by a church leader decades ago that seems incongruent with our doctrine. There's an important principle that governs the doctrine of the church. The doctrine is taught by all 15 members of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. It is not hidden in an obscure paragraph of one talk. True principles are taught frequently and by many. Our doctrine is not difficult to find. So, and that's what some people do, and that's why I think we have to be careful when there's like something that's brought up by just one person. Not to say that we should like discount it, but not build whole things off of just like that one paragraph or sentence or whatever the case may be. And that's exactly what some people do, whether it's like with this or like things out of the Apocrypha that you never hear anywhere else. And then it's just accepted as gospel truth. And entire, fan fiction is basically made out of those things. All right, so going back. All right, so that's all that I have for that one. The next one is the signs of the times will be very obvious. And this is something that, again, there's people that paint a picture of the second coming that there's just going to be these massive, colossal things before the second coming that are just going to be so obvious. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So this is from George Q. Cannon in the Journal of Discourses. It's a little bit longer, but it's so good what he says here. He was at this time of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, but later on he was in the First Presidency. He says, I will read a portion of a revelation given through the prophet Joseph Smith, previous to the organization of the church, dated April 1829. Quote, Oliver Cowdery, verily, verily, I say unto you, that assuredly as the Lord liveth, who is your God and your Redeemer, even so surely shall you receive a knowledge of whatsoever things you shall ask in faith, with an honest heart, believing that you shall receive a knowledge concerning the engravings of the old records, which are ancient, which contain those parts of my scripture of which has been spoken by the manifestation of my spirit. Yea, behold, I will tell you in your mind and in your heart by the Holy Ghost, which shall come upon you, and which shall dwell in your heart. Now behold, this is the spirit of revelation. Behold, this is the spirit by which Moses brought the spirit of Israel through the Red Sea on dry ground. End quote. The point I wish to call your attention to is contained in the second and third verses of this revelation. The Latter-day Saints are in many respects like other people who are not Latter-day Saints. We are apt to entertain views which are not very correct and which may be the result of our traditions and preconceived ideas. This is a peculiarity that pertains to mankind generally, that whenever they deal with the things of God, or speak about them, or contemplate them, and especially when they read predictions made by the servants of God concerning future events, or events that may transpire right before their eyes, they are apt to get sometimes erroneous ideas, or at least exaggerated ideas in relation to them. This is something that I would watch out for. You guys don't fall into this category where you get really exaggerated ideas and start venturing off into the spectacular. The prophets have foretold the events that should take place in connection with this work. There is no prophecy that comes to my mind, recorded by Isaiah and Micah, respecting the building of the house of God in the top of the mountains and gathering of the people there, in the object for which they should gather, that they should come up and be taught of the Lord, etc. Now, it might be okay. Now it might be supposed? Now it might be supposed that when that prediction should be okay. Now it might be supposed that when that prediction should be fulfilled, it would be so prominent and remarkable in the midst of the nations of the earth that all the inhabitants thereof who should witness it would say, "This is the fulfillment of the predictions of Isaiah and Micah." Okay, think about that for just a minute. People that expect big, miraculous, incredible events, very obvious, everyone's going to recognize it. That's not how it works. It's not how it works. And it might be thought that all the inhabitants of the earth who witness it would be convinced of the truth of it and would say, "We have no further opposition to this work because we behold the fulfillment of the predictions of those holy prophets, whom we have been taught to regard and whose writings we have read as authority from God." And doubtless there are many Latter-day Saints who have thought in the early days of their experience in this church, when they have heard the elders predict concerning the events that should take place in connection with this work, they have thought and felt in their hearts that when the wicked of those who oppose this work should see the fulfillment of these predictions, they would be constrained to acknowledge that this is the work of God and would cease from hostility and opposition and would say they had been mistaken. For instance, the elders in the early days of this church predicted concerning calamities and wars and troubles of various kinds that would come upon the inhabitants of the earth. There was a revelation given to the prophet Joseph Smith in December 1832 concerning the war that should take place between the southern states and the northern states. This was a definite prediction, stating the exact point where a certain trouble or rebellion or division in the nation should take place. Most of us who have been brought up in the church knew about this revelation from early days. It has been published so that all the members of the church and the world also could have it, and it was but reasonable to expect that so definite a prophecy as this, which stated the exact character of the difficulty that should take place between the South and the North, and that also stated with such definite definiteness the exact point where the division should occur. I say it was but reasonable to expect that when it should be fulfilled, it would have the effect of convincing unbelievers of the truth to the mission of Joseph Smith, in that he really was a man inspired of the Lord to speak the word of God to the people. In 1860, brothers Orson Pratt, Erastus Snow, myself, and others were going on missions, and we arrived at Omaha in the month of November of that year. A deputation of the leading citizens of that city came to our camp and tendered to us the use of the courthouse as they wished to hear our principles. The invitation was accepted, and Elder Pratt preached to them. During the service, there was read the revelation to which I have referred, the revelation concerning the division between the South and the North. The reason probably for reading it was that when we reached Omaha, the news came that trouble was already brewing, and several states were threatening to secede from the Union. Its reading made considerable impression upon the people. A good many had never heard it before, and quite a number were struck with the remarkable character of the prophecy. It might have been expected naturally, speaking and looking at it as men naturally do, that the reading of such a revelation at such a time when the crisis was approaching would have had the effect to direct men's attention to it, and they would be led to investigate its truth and the doctrines of the church and the foundation we had for our belief. But there were, but if there were any converted in that audience, I'm not aware of it. Good seed was sown, but we did not remain to see the effect it produced. The revelation began so remarkable, and the events then transpiring, being so corroborative of its truth, one might naturally think, as there were present at this occasion the leading and thinking portion of that community, that a great number would have been impressed with the probability of its truth and would have investigated and joined the church. You doubtless remember it was a good while it was a good while doubtful whether the rebellion should commence at South Carolina or not. I was in England at the time and was engaged in publishing the Millennial Star and took a great deal of notice of the American papers. And I well remember that to all human appearances, it seemed for a while as though the trouble would break out at Fort Pickens, Florida. But the word of God had been spoken concerning that event, and consequently, it had to be fulfilled as predicted, and the war did commence at South Carolina. It was fulfilled, as you all know, to the very letter, Fort Sumter being the place where the rebellion broke out. Now, I allude to that in connection with this subject to show you that not only is the world mistaken in its views respecting the fulfillment of the predictions of the prophets, but even Latter day Saints have doubtless, in many instances, entertained erroneous views respecting the fulfillment of revelation and prophecies of the Bible. I have no doubt there are many here tonight who have had some experience in this and can look back at times in their own lives when they have thought, surely, when these things which the prophets have foretold are brought to pass, the people will be convinced. My friends who now ridicule me will then be convinced, and they will be forced to confess that I did right in embracing the gospel. No doubt there are some in this audience tonight who have had these ideas, and certainly there are good reasons for entertaining them. But experience has taught us that while while the, while there may be a few who, when they have seen the predictions fulfilled, have acknowledged that our course is right, in the majority of cases throughout the earth where the gospel has been preached, the fulfillment of the predictions of the prophets uh, has not had the effect to convince the people of the truth of the ministry of God, the ministry God has given unto us. Even with this experience in the past, the Latter-day Saints themselves are not entirely divested of extravagant views respecting the effects which are likely to follow the fulfillment of predictions yet in the future. Are we not all inclined to look forward to many events which have been predicted by the servants of God as being of so great and wonderful, and may I say so supernatural a character, that when they shall be fulfilled, they will even they will even startle us who believe they are coming, and will compel the unbelieving inhabitants of the world to accept them as evidences of the truth. In our thoughts, this seems to be the natural tendency. I notice it in myself, I notice it in others. When we read respecting the great events which are to take place in connection with this work, as predicted in the Book of Doctrine and Covenants, are we not inclined to think that surely, when these things shall come to pass, all the earth, as well as ourselves, will be constrained to acknowledge this to be the work of God, and these events to be indeed those which have been predicted by the prophets. Now, I would not for the world say one word to lessen in the minds of my brethren and sisters the importance of these events. Sorry. I would not say one word to weaken your proper expectations, but my experience has taught me that the Lord works in the midst of this people by natural means, and that the greatest events that have been spoken of by the holy prophets will come along so naturally as the consequence of certain causes that, unless our eyes are enlightened by the Spirit of God and the Spirit of revelation rests us, we will fail to see that these are the events predicted by the holy prophets. Just think about that for a second. Think about the different things and theories that are out there that have been proposed, written in books, put in videos, whatever, that predict on timelines exactly how things are going to happen, and they're going to be so big and marvelous and da 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 da. And compare that to what a member of the first presidency, or at least a future member of the first presidency, says about it. He continues, I refer you again to that prophecy of Isaiah and Micah respecting the gathering together of Israel of God from the nations from the various nations to Zion. As we read of that in the Bible, we might think when that was fulfilled, it would be done with such supernatural manifestations that the people would be constrained to acknowledge it was the work of God. Yet, we see it every day. And let me pause there. We see it every day. You guys, let's go back to this. We are literally seeing disasters almost every single day this month, at least. And many more over the last few years. Things have basically picked up in intensity. And yet, this is not convincing anybody except for those that are already sensitive, I think, or sensitive to the Spirit, have eyes to see, ears to hear, right? And you'll always come across those people that are like, you haven't seen anything yet. This is nothing. This is nothing compared to what's going to happen in the future. And if that's what you're expecting, I think you're going to be let down. This is it. This is it. All these fires, floods, earthquakes that are happening right now, this is it. All right, let's go back. So we see it every day. Our people are gathering, and men and women who immigrate bear testimony to friends they leave behind in almost the exact language that the prophets said they would. And yet, it is not thought very extraordinary. Why is this? Because it has come along so naturally. And so, with the great events that will take place in the future, they will come along in so natural a manner, the Lord will bring them to pass in such a way that they will not be accepted by the people, except by those who that can comprehend the truth. You know, you remember that part in the Book of Mormon? We've talked about this before. Let's see. How's it go? It's like less and less. Okay. Um, let's read it. So this is in 3rd Nephi, chapter 2, verse 1. 3rd Nephi of all books is the one that probably is the most relevant to us as we think about the second coming. And it says, "And it came to pass that thus passed away the 95th year also, and the people began to forget those signs and wonders which they had heard, and began to be less and less astonished at a sign or a wonder from heaven, insomuch that they began to be hard in their hearts and blind in their minds, and began to disbelieve all which they had heard and seen." That's just how it goes. That's how it goes. These people that are always discounting, the things that are happening in the world, they're becoming less and less astonished, even though what we're seeing is record-breaking events. In Canada, the worst wildfire season that they've had in that nation's history, in their recorded history. China, Beijing, in Hong Kong, the most rainfall they've ever received in 140 years, which goes back to when records began. In all these different places, Louisiana, this month, the largest wildfire that state has ever seen. And people are just like, whatever. Well, okay, you can keep whatever until time's up. We would do well to be looking at these signs and understand that it's getting closer and closer and closer really quick. All right, continuing. It says, okay, comprehend. Where did I end? They will not accept by the people. They will not be accepted by the people except those who can comprehend the truth as the fulfillment of the predictions of the prophets. It requires the Spirit of God to enable men and women to understand. No, where? No, okay, sorry, I'm up here. Okay. Why is this? Because it comes along so naturally, and so with the great events that will take place in the future, they will come along in so natural a manner. The Lord will bring them to pass in such a way that they will not be accepted by the people, except those who can comprehend the truth as the fulfillment of the predictions of the prophets. It requires the Spirit of God to enable men and women to understand the things of God. It requires the Spirit of God to enable the people to comprehend the work of God and to perceive his movements and providences among the children of men. The man who is destitute of the Spirit of God cannot comprehend the work of God. A woman whose mind has not been enlightened by the Spirit cannot see or comprehend any of these events that take place in fulfillment of the prophecies of the holy prophets. You take two persons, one who has the Spirit of God, whose mind is enlightened by that Spirit, the Spirit of revelation, the same Spirit that rested upon the prophets who wrote the revelations and prophecies we have. You take a man of that kind, and then take another who is none of that Spirit, and put the two together, and the one man's eyes will be open to see the hand of God in these events. He will notice his movements and his providence in everything connected with his work, and they will be testimonies to him to strengthen his faith and to furnish his mind with continual reasons for giving thanks to and worshiping God, while the man who is not the Spirit of God will see nothing godlike in the occurrences, nothing which he will view as supernatural. Sorry, nothing which he will view as supernatural, as many suppose everything which exhibits God's power to be, or nothing which he will accept as a fulfillment of prophecies. His eyes will be closed, his heart will be hardened, and to all the evidences of the divinity of these things, he will be impenetrable. To those who have mingled with the world, the reason for this the reasons for this are very plain. Men do not believe in these days in the direct interposition of God in the affairs of men. If they even believe in God, they believe he governs the universe by great natural laws. When, therefore, a great and wonderful event occurs, they seek for its origin and explanation in some natural law. And you guys, I hear this all the time, sometimes from some of you in the comments that, well, this happened because of this. We understand how that happens. We know what a derecho is. We know what a hurricane is. This is just because you can explain it doesn't mean that it's not a sign. It's how it happens. It's the different circumstances that go along with it. It's the frequency. It's, maybe it's record breaking. But more importantly, it's the message that's conveyed to the people that understand that makes it a sign. It's not about, oh, did this magically happen? If it magically happened, then it's a sign. But if it happened according to science, then it's not a sign. As though God doesn't work through science and created science. All right, continuing. They ignore the fact that God works through natural laws, but some seem to think that if he were to interpose at all, it would be by manifesting his power through the suspension of natural laws, by overriding and in violating them, and in such a supernatural manner that mankind would be compelled to acknowledge it was his act, as they would be utterly unable to account for it by any laws known to them or in any other way than as being through his power. Wars, famines, pestilences, cyclones, earthquakes, which we are tracking that in great detail right now on this channel, and the great variety of calamities which God has said will be poured out upon the wicked nations are therefore looked upon by men generally in these days as the result of certain well-defined and easily explained causes. When any of these calamities visit a city or a nation, they immediately commence to investigate the laws which govern them, and by the violation of which they assert they are produced. And when they discover what they allege is the cause, they triumphantly point to it, and that is sufficient proof that the Lord has nothing special to do with it. For if it were a visitation from him, it is supposed to be so supernatural as to be inexplicable. And thus, men go on hardening their hearts and denying God's power until they will be so completely given over to the evil one that he will lead them captive according to his will. My reason for calling your attention to the word of the Lord I have read to you is that I have sometimes thought that our people do not appreciate as they should do the spirit. Wait. That I have sometimes thought that our people do not appreciate as they should do the spirit of revelation, the spirit of prophecy, the power of God that has been poured out upon us as a people. The fact seems to be overlooked that it was in the manner in which the Lord tells Oliver Cowdery that Moses brought the children of Israel through the Red Sea on dry ground. The Lord said to Oliver, I will tell you in your mind and in your heart by the Holy Ghost, which shall come upon you, and which shall dwell in your heart. Now, behold, this is the spirit of revelation. Behold, this is the spirit by which Moses brought the children of Israel through the Red Sea on dry ground. How many Latter-day Saints are there who understand that this is the way in which Moses led the children of Israel so miraculously? How many are there who think that if we had a man like Moses among us, the people would be led differently with greater manifestations of power than they are? How many are there who are dissatisfied with what God is doing at present and are looking for someone to appear in the future who shall exhibit convincing and overwhelming manifestations of power? How many are there at the present time who are neglecting the precious and inestimable gift of revelation which God has bestowed upon his people because it does not come to them in the way to suit their preconceived notions and ideas, or who are not suited with the way the church has been and is led, because because there is not that wonderful degree of power exhibited which they imagine should be. Apostates have asserted that there was not the power. Okay, wait. Apostates have asserted that there was not the power in the leaders of the church which there should be. They said so during the life of the prophet Joseph Smith. Sorry, the prophet Joseph, asserting that he was a fallen prophet. After his death, they made the same statements respecting President Young, his counselors, and the 12 apostles. And if I am not mistaken, there are some members of the church who have appeared to think that there has been some power lacking and have manifested a feeling of restlessness, anticipating the rise of someone who should have great authority uh, than at present exists. Holy cow, this is really long. I'm gonna end here. Okay. I had forgotten how long this actually is. Let me just read this part though. But it is the truth that the same spirit of revelation that rested upon Moses and which enabled him to lead the children of Israel through wait, did I already read that? No, you know what? I'm just gonna end. I'm gonna end. Okay, let me just read this last short one right here. This is by Hubie Brown. The kingdom is rolling forth. Really interesting. I just mentioned him in the last video. He had a experience in which he essentially met with how am I forgetting his name? President Harold B. Lee. After President Harold B. Lee passed away, he visited Hubie Brown at the dedication or around the time of the dedication of the Washington, D.C. temple. Okay, so he said, and he was a first counselor in the first presidency. He says, I want to say to you, brethren, that in the midst of all the troubles, the uncertainties, the tumult, and the chaos through which the world is passing, almost unnoticed by the majority of the people of the world, there has been a kingdom over which God the Father presides, and Jesus the Christ is King. That kingdom is rolling forward, as I say, partly unnoticed, but it is rolling forth with power in a force that will stop the enemy in its tracks while some of you live. So these are really powerful words. Oh, here's another one by Joseph Fielding Smith. That's okay. I'm gonna skip it. But he says the same thing. The words of the prophets are rapidly being fulfilled, but it is done on such natural principles that most of us fail to see it. And yet, there are people. Uh, there are people that will tell you the exact opposite. That everything's going to be so amazing, wonderful, supernatural, miraculous, right? Which has never made a lot of sense to me. Like in the way that they talk, the manner of which would be supernatural, the suspension of natural laws, big exciting events. It's very reminiscent of the Jews before Christ came. That they thought that they understood the scriptures so well, they leaned to their own interpretation, um, looking for the mysteries and like the exciting things. And when Messiah comes, he's gonna be so powerful. He's gonna do this and da 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 da. They thought that they knew so well And then when he did come, they missed it. And the same thing's going to happen with the second coming. Not that anyone's going to miss it when Christ comes. Everyone will know who's in charge. But as far as like the timing of the second coming, there's people that think that they understand the scriptures so well, they rely on their own understanding and their interpretation of the scriptures, and they cherry pick quotes from certain prophets, but ignore all the other ones and twist things and contort things to where they've convinced themselves and others that the second coming is not even close because so much has to happen. Or we know for a fact that this and this and this hasn't happened, as though they have some kind of authority to say that. So, sorry, it's just I'm a little bit passionate about this because I've been dealing with this ever since I started this channel. People coming over and being like, no, we're not even close. I'm afraid there's too much that has to happen. Or, discounting things that are happening in the world. Just like, oh, well, that's nothing, blah, blah, blah. Whatever they say. So I'm going to go with the words of the prophets. I'm going to go with the scriptures and the prophets, both of them together. And I'm going to go with all the prophets instead of just narrowing in on the ones that I like. Take it all together. And then when there is any sort of contradiction, like I said, for example, and there really aren't any except for the 10 lost tribes. And when there is, you plot it out, you put it on a timeline, and then you see, oh, well, in the early church, they did believe that the 10 lost tribes were a hidden group. But later, that's no longer the case. And it's as simple as the fact that things are revealed line upon line, precept upon precept. It's not that hard. It's not that hard. It's not that Reuben V. Oliad of the 70 is wrong and James E. Talmage is right. It's that Reuben V. Oliad is from our time, and more revelation and inspiration has been received by him, Dallin H. Oaks, President Nelson, Bruce R. McConkie, LeGrand Richards. It isn't that hard. But for some reason, people like to stick with the old, romanticized versions of things because I don't know, for any number of reasons. I don't know. But anyway, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.